All right, so tonight we're going to knock out some brakes and an oil change on this 2017 Buick Envision. This is actually my grandparents' car. We got it from them brand new from auction for a very good deal, and they've had it for like 4 years now. So the brakes are starting to squeal a little bit, so we're gonna go ahead and take a look at those, figure out what's going on there. I'm gonna rotate the tires in the process, and then we're gonna change the oil on it because it's time for an oil change. So first steps is to get it in the air. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you probably don't have a lift, but you just get it up on a jack stand and get your tires suspended, and then we will take this thing off. The lug nuts are 19 millimeters, so I'm gonna go ahead and shoot these puppies off, and then we'll take a look at what we gotta do. All right, so here we are tire off, completely supported, ready to go. So first things first, we got to get the caliper off. So if you look here on the back side, you will see a 14 millimeter bolt on the top and a 14 millimeter bolt on the bottom. So we're going to take both of these off, and then this whole thing will wiggle, and we can set it back here or zip tie or bungee cord it up to your coil spring, and just make sure that it's supported and not hanging on the brake line. All right, so now with the caliper off, you'll see I just sat mine right up here on this bracket. Hopefully this light helps a little bit. It's not suspended from the brake line. It's nice and sturdy, ain't gonna fall, good deal. So now here we are to the pads. So you'll notice on this one in particular that I'm working on, which is my grandparents', it doesn't actually need pads, but you can check that by looking through here and seeing how much pad thickness you have left to the backing, and you'll see how there's a lot of pad here, and yeah, they don't actually need pads, but I'm going to take it apart and show you how to do it without actually replacing these. I know what the problem is. I've done the other side already. Grandma or grandpa neglected to say they've obviously paid somebody to do their brakes. I don't know if they were on vacation or what. They live behind us, so I don't know why they would do that, but they installed these wrong. So first things first, I don't know if this is like this from the factory or if these guys just did it. Like I said, these little metal, they have a fancy name, I can't remember what it's called, but these metal clips that go onto your caliper bracket, they have these little tabs they hammered up, so the pads cannot come out without beating these tabs down on each side. So I'm going to tap that one down with a flathead screwdriver, and I'm going to go to the back side, and they got one tapped up on that side as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get both of these tapped down, and once those are down, this pad can walk right out on both sides. So I'm gonna get these pads out, and then we'll take a gander at what they've done here, and then I'll show you how to keep going if you're doing an actual brake job. All right, so first off, if anybody's curious, the issue here is these little slides. You'll see these little arms here. These arms need to be on this side of your pad, not pushed in towards the rotor. They're bent because they installed them and they just pushed them in with the pad on all four on this side. The other side they had 50-50, but this is not how they're supposed to be, and it's pushing them closer to the rotor. So after just a little bit, they ended up going in and touching and making that horrible metal on metal squeaking sound like you have bad brakes. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm actually just gonna show you real quick, since I'm already here, how to do a true brake job. So anytime you're doing your brakes, if your pads are worn down, right, they have set into the rotor. So it is correct and good practice, even if they feel somewhat smooth with no lip on them. I can tell you, wherever they went for these, they didn't even change the rotor. There's a lip on it, but I'll deal with that the next time it needs actual brakes. But in your case, and if I was doing this job completely, then you want to get your rotor at least turned, which any auto parts store will do for you. It's like 25 or 30 bucks, and what they essentially do is just remachine the surface to make sure it's perfectly flat. Whenever you drive through water, if you're braking and you go hot to cold, they'll warp a little bit. The pads cut into the rotor surfaces, so it's good practice to make sure you at least get them turned, if not replace them. So the next step to get to that point is going to be to remove this caliper bracket here. So this caliper bracket is going to have 2 bolts on the back side. This one, whoa, those are big dogs. It looks like about a 21. Let me go grab them though, and we'll take a gander and just make sure that's right. But yeah, look how bent up that bracket is. Oh yeah, who did this? Okay, and it was indeed a 21, and they're going to be very, very tight. They come from the factory with Loctite on them. If you're not familiar with it, it basically is a thread locker. So once it gets hot, getting tightened in and torqued to spec, it swells and it makes it harder to take the bolt out so it doesn't fall out on you. Just an extra safety precaution. Make sure you put it back on. So if you don't want to reuse a Loctite, they sell it at any auto parts store. I'll have a link in the description from Amazon for some as well. So you just kind of apply some more or clean out the old threads. I like to do that with the wire wheel and then apply more Loctite. On that note, I will have a link in the description from Amazon for brake pads, a good set that comes with new clips, which we'll go over in a second, why that's important, and a cool caliper depressing tool. So if you're not in a hurry and you want to order those, that really helps us out. That would be awesome. But here we are. We're down to the rotor. So you'll see here, this one has a set screw. So this is a T30, it looks like. I'm not going to take it off. I don't need to take mine off, but it is as simple as taking out this T30 screw, and this whole rotor will slide right off. Punk. You can take it to your store, auto parts store, or machine shop. They'll turn it for you, which just basically means making sure it's nice and flat. Or you can buy a new one and install that. These set screws are debatable is the best term I could come up with, I guess. If you live up north of the Mason-Dixon line, those puppies get rusty and they oftentimes have to get drilled out. So fellers that I talk to up there absolutely hate them. Down here in Texas, I enjoy them. So all that does is hold your rotor nice and vertical. It makes it easier to put your caliper bracket on and everything else before you put your tire on. Make sure you don't like scratch it up on accident or something, which is still hard to do. But you don't actually need this. So it is up to you whether or not you want to put the set screw back in. If you put somewhere that it's rusty, you probably might not want to push it because that becomes a real pain when you got to drill and tap it out of there. But yeah, as simple as that. Take that screw out, off comes the rotor. So now let's go look at the caliper bracket. I'll show you a couple things with this. If you're new to this whole gig, so this is your caliper slides. So you want to test these with your fingers. Just make sure they move nice and easy. If they don't, you can pop the boot off of the bottom. Actually, this one looks like it's made up onto the top. So give me 2 seconds. I need 2 hands here. Let me set this camera over here. Hopefully you can see it. All right. So you can, work that off the bottom like that and pull the whole thing out. And if yours isn't moving super freely, what you'll do, and we'll just do this one real quick. There we go. Giving it a quick douse. Sorry if I'm being super simple. This actually gets passed up though by even reputable shops a lot. I've had a lot of cars come in here where they just neglected checking your caliper slides, and what ends up happening if these aren't greased well and moving freely is they'll get stuck, and then one pad will be real worn while the other one is not because the caliper can't move the way it needs to move. So there we have that. So this is nice and clean. You can squirt a little bit into the housing if it's gummy. I'm not going to bother doing that right now. But let me grab my grease. You can use red lithium grease, Molly grease, basically whatever you want. It doesn't really matter that much. As long as it's not something that's like flammable, and I don't even know where you find flammable grease these days, or at least at the temperature this will see. So you just wipe it all down with some grease. Don't make it super thick because if you get a bunch of grease in there, then it'll clog the hole essentially and make it not move as freely. But simple as that. So there we go, back to moving. So I'm gonna wipe this off with a paper towel. And if your caliper, and if these puppies just move real easy by hand like these ones do, you don't actually have to do that. That's only if you kind of really got to tug on it and it feels stuck. So now, next step, if you're doing your brake change, you'll have these clips. You can pop these out, put your new ones in, and then we are ready to reinstall. In my case, I'm going to clean these up. You can see I've already finger bent my tabs back where they're supposed to be, so I'm going to clean them up. And then I'm going to show you one final trick actually before reinstall. It's easier to do with it off the car, but you can do it on it as well. But we're going to add a little bit of grease down in these channels just to prevent squeaking in the future. All right, here we go. So I got my Molly grease, but you can use red lithium. Sorry, more people pulling up, always being loud around here. But essentially, we're just gonna take a little dab and we're gonna rub it on the bottoms and the sides of these metal clips, and then we'll reinstall this puppy. All right, here we are, all greased up. You notice you don't overdo it, just a small little amount will do. So I'm gonna go ahead, slap this back in. I got my bolts cleaned up and new Loctite on them. So we'll get them in and get this bolted back up. It's a torque spec of 1, oof, real tight. All right, so now, once you got your caliper bracket on there nice and tight, what you're gonna wanna do is make sure you get on the outside of that when you put them in, right? That little tab, and you just place your pads in just like that. And see how those hug the little feet right there? That tab should be on the inside, poking out, not folded in towards the rotor. I'm not punching these up. I don't know why they would have done that. That's silly to me. So what we're gonna do now is I'll stick the pad on the other side, and then I'll show you. I'm gonna also apply a little bit of non-squeak to the back of these pads just to be extra safe. So I'll show you where I put that too. All right, so here we are, pads are in. What we're gonna do now is apply some disc brake quiet. They actually sell these in little packets at Auto Parts Store. I'll have a link for this as well, just an all-in-one shopping list. But you'll notice this is actually cool. We're using these pads that aren't bad. You'll see up here is the wear marks from where the calipers grab on this side. And then, let me get a flashlight. Here you'll see the circle where the caliper itself presses on the pad. So we're gonna make sure both of those are nice and coated with this, and then we'll be ready to put the caliper back on. All right, there you go. You just rub it on with your finger like this. You want a nice thin coat. And now we are good to take our caliper down and slide it back on. Make sure you don't twist up the brake line in the process.
A few moments later.
So you'll see Grandma's Envision is not in here, and I'm in different clothes, telling you it is the next day. I started to make this video and I realized, like a doofus, since I didn't actually change the brakes, I missed one very important thing, but I'm gonna put it in the important time. So once you've changed your brakes, you need to take your cap off of your brake fluid under the hood, and you need to depress your caliper so that way it will fit over your new pads. I will put a link up for this bad boy right up here, right? This is a caliper depressor tool. If you're gonna change your brakes more than once, it's well worth the like $15. So you just put it in between the caliper and then ratchet it back and forth. Boop, 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 boop. It'll spread it real perfect, right? And then you just flip this little lever right here and it will ratchet the opposite direction and come right out. If you don't want to order that, you can also use a C-clamp in the old brake pad and just manually crank it down and squeeze your piston back in. So just make sure you do that, and then you put your lid back on your brake reservoir after you've done both sides or however many sides you're doing. And when you get in the car, you're going to need to pump your brakes a few times, and then you are good to drive. Here we are, caliper on, nice and tight, all finished up. So what I'm going to show you is one last thing. What I like to do is spin the rotor to where the surface that was in our working area is out and exposed, and just make sure that we check both sides of it up through the crack, make sure there's no grease or greasy fingerprints or anything, and then you can just spray it with some brake cleaner if you do find anything. Make sure you don't have any grease on your rotor surface, because if your pads hit it over braking time, it will embed it into the rotor. But there you have it. Put the wheel back on and you're good to go. If the video helped you out, hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see some more.